I'm just making one last trip up to the apartment to make sure I packed everything. You know, when you leave on a one-week trip, that's a concern. Are you bringing everything you need? I looked at a map of the Southwest and I found some 2-lane roads that look absolutely desolate, and some 4-lane roads that I've heard, even though they're interstates, are exactly what a person needs to drive to chill out. So that's what you and I are going to do for the next 7 days. Drive roads that will lower our blood pressure. That's why I'm calling it my 2,000-mile chill-out road trip. First to Las Vegas, and then to Green River, Utah, through Zion National Park, through the most beautiful interstate in America to Glenwood Springs, across 3 mountain passes to Durango, then through the Four Corners to Flagstaff, finally to Laughlin to play bingo, and then back again. The road out of Palm Springs is interesting. See all the windmills? But it isn't but 20 minutes later that you realize that you're going up to the higher part of the desert. Yes, just north of Palm Springs, the road does some interesting things, but it's still fun to drive. Then there's about 30 minutes through the medium desert, and then this sign. Yep, well, that sign means what it says. We're going to go through a lot of nothing, and here's where you officially head into the Mojave. You put the civilized world, if you will, in your rear-view mirror. The roads up here are great, but as you can see, the weather is quickly changing. So if you ever plan a trip across the Mojave, it's good to check weather conditions and road conditions up here. And it is the immensity here when you come over the first ridge of mountains and you start looking down into the Mojave. It's miles and miles of miles. But don't think it's miles and miles of nothing. There are treasures here. Memories that you'll take back home, photographs you'll look at again and again. For the Mojave is a magic kind of place. And this is a magic place too, the restored Kelso train station. It's at the base of what's called the Sema Grade. Up this grade, in 20 miles, the railroad gains 2,000 feet. You see how the train is going on a smooth track and we're going up and down? You can get airborne here in your car. And there is a little civilization out here. It's Roy's Cafe and Gas Station. Recognize Roy's? It's been in a lot of TV spots recently. Then you go across some nice pavement that was once US 66, and a stern reminder that a lot of traffic came through here. But now about 15 miles to the north, Interstate 40 cuts through here. And as the great Charles Kuralt always said, now with the interstate you can go across the country and not see anything. And maybe that's why Old 66 was so much fun. We'll be seeing more of it in about 4 or 5 days. There are some great sights here in the Mojave, and this is one of my favorite ones. I call this the land of the moon rocks. But let me tell you something about driving across the desert. Don't get distracted. Just chill out. The road through the Mojave is amazing, but watch your speedometer. It got late early here, and by the time I got to I-15 and looked down on the traffic, all you saw was that string of headlights heading away from Vegas. So we joined the road and got to the City of Lights. I stopped by a marvelous museum before turning in. It's called the Neon Museum. Pieces of signs from old Las Vegas are here, including this sign taken down from the Stardust. It's a really amazing place. It's the Neon Museum, just outside of downtown Vegas, a tribute to the amazing lights here and the fun people have had over the years. Well, it's time to turn in. Tomorrow is a very busy day. You know, while you're in Vegas, you really need to do some paperwork. I don't know whether you can see from there. These are my bingo cards. Now, you might not think playing bingo is therapeutic, but I think it is. That's hard to justify when you don't win, but trust me, playing bingo is a way to chill out. You leave Vegas on Old Vegas Boulevard, and finally it merges into Interstate 15. Now, I love two-lane roads, and I'd love to take today's journey on 2 lanes all the way, but you just can't do it. They continue to put the 4-lane on top of the 2-lane. Pretty soon the scenery starts getting great, and then it becomes spectacular. And here along Interstate 15, in a little corner of Arizona, is an optical illusion. When you come around here, it looks as if you're going to drive into the side of a mountain ridge. But you don't. There's a very sharp valley here. And I'll tell you one thing, environmentalists today wouldn't allow a road to be built here. No, the environmentalists would not have allowed this road to be squeezed through the Virgin River Canyon. It's spectacular here. This is the first example of something we'll be seeing a lot of in the next 4 or 5 days, and that's a canyon carved by a river that's barely wide enough for the river, but somehow they managed to squeeze a road and sometimes a railroad and a road through places like this. Finally, you're out of the canyon and into Utah. And just across the line from Arizona is St. George, Utah. You couldn't be any closer in Arizona if you wanted to be. It's a beautiful city with a Mormon temple nestled along the red rocks. And there's a kind of magic here in St. George. Then you head off I-15 into some really gorgeous country, and almost immediately you begin to realize the kind of Christmas-like red and green texture of everything here. And finally you get to Zion National Park. If you think the road to get here was magnificent, just wait until you get into Zion Park. It's one of those parks that people always say they wish they'd come here sooner. Zion is spectacular. Again, if you get through it at the right time of day, especially if you have a red car in front of you, you realize just how beautiful everything is. And then this, a curved 1-mile tunnel that was carved just inside the rock face back in the 1920s. It's pretty rough, but now and then, look, you can see outside. There's very little rock between this roadway and the outside world, but every so often they cut through. They let you see the sunshine coming in. This tunnel by itself is a pretty spectacular part of the West. And as I've said, around every turn there's something beautiful. For years I had wanted to come up here to Zion, and I'm finally here. And I can tell you, except for the fjords of Norway in an odd sort of way, this is the prettiest place I've ever been in my life. There are Kodak moments all over the place here, and I need to point out that as we're leaving Zion, we just went through a small corner of it. You keep going, heading up into Utah, and there's more foliage, more trees, more spectacular cliffs, and more really fun driving. And then this mesa that even has some cattle in it. Very wonderful scenery to get you to chill out. You leave the sleepy city of Green River, Utah, and start heading east. And you don't have to drive very long before you realize you're coming to a very special place. So you may be asking yourself, why would you take a drive to rest you that is partially on interstates? Well, look behind me here. We're on the interstate about to go into the San Rafael Swell here in Utah. This road doesn't replace an old road because there never used to be a road here. And there wasn't a road here for a very, very, very important reason. This is God's country. But about 25 years ago, highway engineers figured they could go through this area. And in opening up this area, the San Rafael Swell, they built what many people think is the most beautiful stretch of interstate highway in the U.S. It holds the record for one thing, and that is the longest distance between services. Nearly 100 miles between gas stations. Everywhere you go, there's something magnificent to see. I wish I hadn't used the word spectacular so much in yesterday's report. You just drink in the scenery here. That's a runaway truck ramp there on the right, by the way. It may not look as if you're going up and down mountains that much, but the swell undulates. A lot of cut-throughs here. This is a magnificent place if you're a geologist to see all the layers of rock from millions of years past. I had no idea Utah looked like this. I knew the Virgin River Canyon was wonderful, but, well, had I not seen the San Rafael Swell, I would have thought the Virgin River Canyon was, well, just about it. Kind of sad to leave the swell and get into other areas, but it is indeed a magnificent part of the interstate. It's won all kinds of awards, and so we keep heading east and eventually get out of Utah. I love these big signs out here in the west. On the other side of the road, of course, it says, "Welcome to Utah." If we learned anything in Utah, is that it has some of the most magnificent scenery in the U.S. Colorado, well, the elevations will start increasing, but we're on our way to Glenwood Springs, which promises to be unique in its own way. And in Colorado, in that great area before you really get to the Rockies, the weather can blow in quickly. We're in a neat valley with a small river running beside the road. We're headed toward Glenwood Springs on another beautiful section of the interstate. Another great valley, well, just one of many you'll go through. Breathe deeply. Look at the clouds. And today it is Amtrak that comes down through the Colorado River Valley. Where we drove is very narrow. Originally, they were able to put a single train track through here, and then US 6 followed. If you remember, up where we were on the interstate, I-70 is 4-lane, but it's very narrow with no median. This is Glenwood Springs, Colorado, a major stop in the mountains for the beautiful Amtrak train that goes between the West Coast and Chicago. And before leaving Glenwood Springs, I walked across the street from the Ramada and took the tram to the Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park. This is a neat little tram car you ride. I felt very secure. It's modern technology and very well put together. And at the top, you can swing out over the valley, or you can take this swing that takes you way out over the valley. Then if you get your stomach settled, there's great food in a restaurant that has magnificent views. And from there, you can see east. This is where we're going to be heading for just a couple of minutes, because you see, toward the east on I-70, years ago they put 2 tunnels through. But once you get to the other side of this ridge, where do you build a road? So how do you crowd an interstate highway, an existing state road, the river, and a railroad through a narrow pass? Well, you didn't for a while. There was a break in I-70 until they did this. Tunnels and elevated roadways all squeezed through Glenwood Canyon. And doing this made highway history. And it's more than just the interesting tunnels they built. It's the way they terraced the roadway, raising one of the lanes higher than the other. It was a monumental piece of road building, and it kept the environmentalists happy. But we've got a lot of miles to go, and almost immediately after leaving Glenwood Springs, the weather turned funny. But look at these beautiful aspen. And one of the reasons you want to drive the mountain back roads of Colorado is scenery like this. It's been raining this morning, so these colors are not as brilliant as they might be, but that's what aspen looks like. It's beautifully yellow. Then all you do is make a little turn, more sharp cliffs, more aspen, but here's what I want to show you. Snow already on the mountains over here. We're not going there. We're going to Durango today. And this road, wet or dry, fall, spring, winter, summer, is incredible. I expected the weather to be a little antsy, but I didn't know it would turn out to be as beautiful as this weather. Maybe I should have tuned in weather radio a little earlier.
Thanks for listening to NOAA Weather Radio KX990 in Montrose, and originating from the National Weather Service office in Grand Junction, Colorado.
And guess what? Here at the top of McClure Pass, it's snowing. I hadn't driven in snow for a long time. I was kind of used to it, but look at that. There's no guardrail here. And it's hard to keep your eyes on the road when there's such incredible scenery. Finally, though, the weather got a little better down into the valley, and we're headed for Silverton. And look at the runoff going down the gutter here. And finally across a pass to the big city of Durango. There used to be scheduled passenger service here. And now, this is an excursion train. It makes that trip up to Silverton and back on a narrow-gauge track. It's a big tourist draw here. I wish we had time to take the train, and I'd love to go through when it's snowing. And it was a great night's sleep in Durango at a little mom-and-pop hotel suggested to me by the Chamber of Commerce. I love these old hotels and motels. They're remnants of the 50s. You leave Durango and head through Cortez, Colorado, and then turn south, and within a few minutes you realize that you're headed for much different terrain. It was a great day yesterday in the mountains, but this certainly is not mountainous, but it's great. It's a rambling two-lane road down through this area that goes past some marvelous geologic formations. But before you get to Arizona, there's a tiny little itty-bitty bit of New Mexico you go through when you turn off this road, because this is the Four Corners, and one of the states is New Mexico, and this place is out in the middle of nowhere. You know, you would think as desolate as this place is, there wouldn't be anybody out here. But this place, where the boundaries of 4 states meet, has been a tourist attraction for decades. You can literally walk from Utah to Colorado to New Mexico to Arizona. And if you're as wide as I am, you can sit in all 4 states at one time. The marker is here. There have probably been 60 million photographs taken here. Somebody ought to write a song about this place. You then move on, and suddenly the terrain changes again. There are cities out here, but they're fewer and farther between. And here in Kayenta, Arizona, a surprise. A McDonald's. And there's a Burger King over there. In this part of the world, fast food is few and far between. So is cellular telephone service. And speaking of communications, if you go inside and listen hard enough, you may hear someone speaking Navajo. This is one of those great 2-lane road corridors that gives you time to unwind and think. And in this beautiful red rock part of the extreme northeastern section of Arizona, there is a U.S. highway through here and power lines. And we are following an old trail, not the Chisholm Trail or the Oregon Trail, but a trail older than any of those, the old Spanish Trail. And it was in this area, the Spanish Trail, not the railroad and really not a river, that became the transportation corridor of today. Finally, we head south towards Flagstaff, and boy, the scenery just won't quit. But there's a major piece of scenery coming up, and you have to stop there. We're on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, and if you were standing where I am one hot July day in the mid-1950s, and were looking right out there, you would have seen something pretty dramatic, because one of the worst air crashes in the history of the U.S., at least for its time, happened on that July day, when 2 state-of-the-art propeller planes, both sightseeing in a way, both on their way from Los Angeles to the east, both of them collided here. And for about 24 hours, this little crossroads, Tuba City, Arizona, was in the news all over the world, for they thought this would be where the survivors would be brought from the plane crash, even though it is, the plane crash site, 50 miles from here. But there were no survivors. 128 died, and that accident helped change American air traffic safety. Oh, look at this. Pine trees. That has to mean we're almost in Flagstaff. Finally, after a great night in Flagstaff, you head out on the interstate again. But again, this is a restful interstate. And coming up is the little town of Williams, Arizona. Very famous, if for no other reason than it is the main entry point to the Grand Canyon, an excursion train from here to the rim. Finally, there's the sign you're looking for. You're a chance to drive Old 66. And the holy grail of Route 66 is here in Ash Fork, Arizona. It's where there's a long 100-mile stretch that begins that when the interstate people came through, they left it alone. The interstate scoots straight across to Kingman, but Old 66 hobbles up around through Hackberry and makes its own way. This section here is the original Route 66. You drive 66 to probably the most famous tourist trap on the old road, Seligman, Arizona. You gotta stop there. Well, I got my bottle of pop and I've had my lunch here in Seligman, Arizona. I was here about 15 years ago, and they showed me some dramatic photos of what 66 was like the day before the interstate opened, and then the day after. Just imagine this road, 66, back in its heyday, with all the Model Ts going down through here and everybody stopping here for lunch. There's still a lot of people here, but it's not like the old days. But the people who are here now are looking for nostalgia. They're reliving America's past. This section of 66 is well preserved. It's an Arizona state highway now. The interstate cut the corner, the old road went up and around, and thank God you can still drive it. But there is kind of a downside for those of us who travel 66. Look at this highway. When the people in the 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s came through here, it wasn't quite this wide, and the pavement wasn't this good. You see, the scenery is the same, but the road's better than it ever has been. So you get a little bit of a feel of Old 66, but not the genuine feel of it. But that's what happens. People still come and drive this road, though, because as I've been saying, they want to get a little look at the past. But things change at Kingman. It's unfortunate how many people bail out of Old 66 at Kingman, because there's 65 miles more of preserved road. And unlike the beautifully manicured Highway 66 we've seen, that's full width in its lanes and lines on both sides, this is the old pavement here. This is a section near Oatman, Arizona, and this is much what drivers saw when they came through this area years ago. It's mountainous. Right now the speed limit is only 25. There was no beautiful line down the middle, but cars, as you can see in a moment, still make it through this area because they want to see what the old road was really like. This is a wonderful piece of Old 66. It forces you to slow down and look at the scenery. And after all, that's what we've been doing the past days, chilling out. But be careful when you go through Oatman. Those are actually, they're burros in the street. This city is famous for its wild burros. The city takes care of them because they have become a tourist attraction. Finally, it's back on the 4-lane as you head for Bullhead City, Arizona, and across the river, Laughlin, Nevada. Well, here we are, Laughlin, Nevada, Bullhead City, Arizona, across the river, and this is the Colorado. And the thought occurs to me when we were up at Glenwood Springs, Colorado, the river that ran through town that used to be called the Grand River is the Colorado. When we were at Grand Canyon, there's the Colorado, and by golly, here's the Colorado again. And we're back to those beautiful two-lane roads. Actually, in this part of California, as we head west, we're at the edge of the Mojave Desert. We have fewer than 150 miles to go now, and we're at Vidal Junction, California. I'm sure it has nothing to do with Vidal Sassoon or Gore Vidal. There is an agricultural inspection station here. People coming into the state of California, well, they want to know, particularly if they're trucks, if they're carrying any prohibited agricultural products. We're in the home stretch. As I mentioned, a combination of far-flung, desolate two-lane highways and some sleepy interstate on our 7-day, 2,000-mile journey around the West. And look at this. Road construction. Well, you got a plan for that, but wait a minute. You got to sit here and just chill out. And just yards before we leave the two-lane and get on the interstate for the last part of our journey, we're in Desert Center, California, which shows up on the map, but when you get here, there isn't anything here. At least anything that's still open. It's an exchange point for some of the truck drivers now, but look, you see that little remnant of road? That predated Interstate 10. It was the old road between LA and Phoenix. Back in the heyday, this was a jumping place. But it's not anymore. It's fading into history. It's becoming a blur along the American highway. Well, that looks familiar. We're close to Palm Springs now. It's been an interesting 7 days, and if you've stuck with me through the trip, I hope you realize just how therapeutic driving can be. You have to pick your roads, and you have to pick the time of the year. But it's a great way, if you play your cards right, to just breathe fresh air. 7 days that I hope have helped you relax, because that's what I wanted to do on this trip, to chill out. Drive the big roads that were fun and the little roads that were even more fun. Thanks for going along.